Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Jody Lynn, we have a really unusual guest today. I mean, we have lots of interesting and unusual guests. I should probably preface it that way because we know all of our guests are different. They have interesting takes on things, all kinds of life experiences, and I'm sure it's going to be no different with Britt. But the reason I say that Britt is such an unusual guest for us is because she has a focus that we don't normally talk about. She has a focus on families in particular. She has a focus on, she's actually, she has an organization called Your Feeding Friend LLC, excuse me. And she has a bunch of things that she's into, including the fact that she's also, like us, a podcaster. She has her own podcast called The Odd Mom Pod. Say that one 3 times fast. We're going to learn a little bit more about that. So Britt Sandoval, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you doing today?
I'm so good. Thanks so much for having me.
We're glad to have you. So I'm not sure where to begin. I think I'm going to start with the podcast. Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, so it's new to me. I just started in January, at the end of January. So this week will be episode 17.
Very good.
Definitely been a learning experience and a lot more work than I ever anticipating. I never thought podcasting was going to be that difficult. But
it does get easier over time. I will tell you that. As you get your habit down, as you get your pattern down, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. Even just like 3 months in, I'm finally starting to figure out my little things and really getting lined up with guests and figure out my interview structure. So it's been really phenomenal. I started it mostly. I am a lactation consultant by trade. I own Your Feeding Friend, like you said, and I'm a inclusive infant feeding educator. So I'm internationally board certified in lactation, but my real passion is actually supporting families with really significant medical issues that may be impacting feeding either maternally or with the infant. So I like to be more inclusive in that I do a lot of bottle teaching and helping kids win off G-tubes and things like that. So, but I was finding over and over again and working with families, I've had the opportunity to work with 800 families over the last 3 years that I've been in practice. And there was just such a lack of a place for resources and for parents who were kind of changing up their breaking generational curses and parenting maybe in ways that they weren't parented themselves or breaking through trauma. And so that's kind of where the Odd Mom Pod was born. We're just kind of a community of parents who are parenting differently, where we share unique different perspectives. I interview lots of parents, obviously, but authors, different parenting coaches of different types, other professionals. And so it's just kind of a catch-all place. There's an episode for hopefully anybody out there's goal at some point. But it's been really fantastic and I've really enjoyed it.
And you have so many different things you've been embracing toward that path. That's very cool. Now, there's always a story that goes behind all this. The thing that got the whole thing started. It often has a trauma associated with it. Usually some great lesson got learned and, I got to share that with the world. I have a feeling that might be true here too. But tell us your story. How did you get to doing what you're doing today?
Well, it's been obviously a journey. I had a really traumatic childhood, lots of unfelt safety in my home. There was some domestic violence, some very emotionally abusive type situations on all sides of the family. And so I really just grew up without a lot of skills. And as I went into teenagehood, my lack of skills, I ended up with an eating disorder, addicted to drugs very young. And really kind of lost my path very young. And honestly, I have to give so much credit to my mom. She was amazing. She was only 17 when she had me, but she really embraced parenting differently and allowed me to kind of forge my own path, but also helping guide me back onto a really solid one. And then I kind of just found myself in this cycle of chasing fleeting fulfillment. I would find myself in different careers or find myself in different hobbies. I started a successful clothing business that I ran for years and did great, but just never quite felt like I was finding that fulfillment. And through my coming out journey, I came out as pansexual and non-binary in the last 2 years, kind of really started to learn to embrace my authentic self. And in that have really learned how to unlock abundance. So now that's kind of launched me into my speaking career, and I'm writing a book about the 4 A's of abundance and how to unlock it wherever you are in your life, because we don't always get to choose our circumstances, but we always get to be intentional with our action and how we handle it. So.
And on Sunday, she rested. So, yeah, that's quite a story. That is really something. There's so many different directions to go on this one. I think probably, Jody Lynn, the first thing that jumps out to me is the traumas that she went through and how she kind of emerged out from the other end and exploded her life into, oh my God, I can't even count how many directions it went. But what's jumping out to you? What's your big takeaway so far?
Oh, I love that that it's gone in so many different directions, and that, Britt, you had the courage to, even though you were in a position of success, say, this doesn't feel good. I don't really want to do this. I want to do something else. Because most people, when they get to that spot where they're experiencing some success, they feel stuck, like the golden handcuffs. I must stay here. Or, I went to school for this. How can I change? We beat ourselves up over all of these things. But if it's not working and you're not feeling fulfilled, you got to do something different. So that's kind of what stood out for me.
The thing that also stands out to me is how, despite the fact that you had a number of curveballs thrown at you pretty young, you went through some pretty rough stuff too. I'm going to take I always feel a little bit weird asking this, because it almost always works out to be true, but you never know if you're stepping on toes or, pricking, uncomfortable points, touching old burns and scars and so forth. But I'll ask it anyway. So many people who've come onto the program over the years that I've been doing this have told how they went through their traumas. They, of course, would never want to go through them again, but they are grateful they went through them. They learned so much from them. It launched their careers, it launched their lives, and so forth. You're nodding your head up again. You're another. Is this true? I mean, is this really true for you?
It is, and it's not. So this is really something I actually, when I speak to audiences, I talk about how in the 4 A's of abundance, right, we have self-awareness, and that's kind of where you're touching on that. People are aware of their traumas and how they have impacted them, and people get to this awareness phase and the self-awareness phase, and they kind of go one of two ways. They either take it and they accept that those are parts of them, and they accept that those are things that have happened to me, and I am going to use those to be intentional in my next steps. Or you get stuck to where you fall into this, everything is against me and I can't get out of that type of situation. And so you're often going to hear of people who are will say, yes, what I went through is difficult and hard, and I'm aware of how that impacted me, and I'm now changing the structures around me to prevent this from happening to other people, is essentially the goal, right? But also you forget that there's a lot of people who are kind of stuck, and that's kind of where I really love to meet people, and podcasting is such a great way to reach people who may be stuck. And without that acceptance of who you are and the understanding of being able to look at the actions of others with acceptance and understanding, we may not understand why they did those things, but if we can understand how they impacted us and really sit with and accept those things, that's when you can move into the third step, which is alignment and action. And so that you can learn to take those difficult things and accept them and use them for good, because that's not always the case for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I love the nuance of that answer, because I mean, the question as I pose it, there's not really a good way to pose the question, but the way I pose it, you kind of have to pose it in sort of a black and white thing. Like, well,
yeah,
did it actually help? Did it hurt? Was it in the way? And your nuance was right, because there is plus and minus to everything that we experience.
Yeah. And I definitely, that's essentially where my passion and my acceptance and my alignment and taking action has led me, is that I was tired of being stuck. And I was very stuck for a long time. And that's when you get in that cycle that fleeting fulfillment because you are unable to even connect with your own inner self and your needs. And so how can you take action to meet those needs if you're constantly taking action to meet the needs of others around you?
Yeah, let's dive into that for a moment. When you say stuck, and I think we kind of have an idea, but let's go into that. What's stuck to you? What makes a person stuck?
For me in particular, it boiled down to, I did this counseling program, and in the program, on the very first day, they said, I want you to think of 3 things that you like, only you like, activities, hobbies, things that you enjoy, but they cannot be associated with a memory of another person. This has to be something genuinely that only you enjoy for your actual action. Because so often as people pleasers or those who've experienced trauma, or we get into that comfortable stuck space where we don't want to rock the boat, we're okay, we're not necessarily living our best life or thriving, but we have a decent job and our relationships are pretty fine and we're doing okay. But until you kind of get to that point where you have to look and say, am I doing the things that I'm doing because of how the other people around me are fulfilled by that? Like, I work this job that I don't necessarily love because it pays my bills. And yes, so I am meeting some of my needs, but are my emotional needs being met? Am I my growth mindset where I want to do like my dreams? Is that being met? And then you have to start breaking it down to taking the action to meeting your needs. And sometimes that's really freaking hard. Like Jody Lynn was saying, uprooting when you are in a good spot, it's tough, but I've never done it and it not turned out to make me happier and a better place in my life. And it's not without hardship. It's going to be difficult. But when you take an action because it's genuinely connected to you at who the core of you are, and it's because you are meeting your needs, it's a lot easier to find contentness in that action, no matter whatever the outcome looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that contentment is elusive, but once you find it, there's actually a confidence builder in it. It's kind of built in.
Yeah. And once you learn how to live in that and you learn what living in that feels like, you don't take any less than that. Like, I'm not going to live less than that.
Not going to settle anymore.
Yeah. Why would I do that when I know what freedom and like truly living to myself and my happiness is? And that's been the biggest thing. And when you start living in that, your actions will automatically change, but also your interactions with other people are going to change, because when you are completely fulfilled in your needs, you're able to give to those around you in a different way, and not just with more time or more presentness, but like you're giving the gift of your authenticity and your ability to connect and your vulnerability. And that's only something you can do once you have really gotten to the root and accepted that that's an okay part of you, and that you want to take that part and help others to get unstuck from their part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to ask something else that I don't tend to ask, but I'm really curious in your case. And if I'm pushing too far out there, let me know, and I'll pull back. I don't mind pulling back. It's okay. But I'm kind of curious to know more about your spiritual outlook. Like, do you see the world the way you did, say, when you were going through all those traumas as a teenager, or do you see the world differently? And how do you approach the world? Has your spiritual outlook evolved? What's it turned into? If you're willing, give us an idea.
No, absolutely. I'm an open book. I'm about as vulnerable and open as you can get. So
Okay.
Don't even worry about it. So it has really evolved. I didn't really grow up in a super religious home. But when I actually found myself at the bottom of my pit in my teens, that's my family actually went very heavily religious into the Episcopal Church, and the Pentecostal type space, very evangelical Christian space. And yeah, it was definitely interesting. And that's one of those perspectives where I'm very thankful for my time in the church because it genuinely saved my life. I was at a point where I didn't have hope. I didn't have anything to hold on outside of myself. Didn't have the I didn't think I had the potential to do anything or that my life could become anything, because when you're 15 years old and weigh 85 pounds and addicted to pills, like, you don't see the world beyond what's right in front of you. And so my mom, when she found that I had gotten addicted to pills and things like that, she sent me to a weekend church retreat. And I detoxed during that trip weekend and felt awful, but I made phenomenal friendships. And, there's something about live music around a bonfire that no matter who you are, or what you believe in, will make you feel some type of way and
Sure.
make you cry. And when you're writing down all of the difficult things that have happened to you and throwing it into a bonfire, it was incredibly healing for me. And it genuinely, in that moment, absolutely was what saved my life. And so it was finally something for me to cling to. But I found as I got older and as kind of the change of the world started happening, I started seeing, the pandemic happened, things like George Floyd happened. And as somebody who is very all about loving literally everybody, I really found that my core beliefs and the way and the lack of the way that the church was responding to world events really kind of changed my outlook on organized religion. And so at that point, my spouse and I, who had been married in the church at 20 years old, he was in school to be a youth pastor. We were heavily involved in our church for many years. We decided to step away from organized religion and kind of reevaluate things. And to be honest, we're kind of still in this evaluation type journey. I believe in a higher power or energy or spiritual energy. I believe we're all connected in some way, and that there is a reason that we're on this planet and the time that we're on this planet. But I don't think Sky Daddy's up there controlling all of my actions and making everything that happens in my life happen at the time it's supposed to happen.
You're not a puppet on a string, really?
Yeah. And I feel like, when you kind of start to be like, I'm going to live in my abundance and I'm going to be intentional with my action because I choose my destiny, it really kind of clashes with that whole, please make it happen for me. And I can't live in that where I'm praying for opportunities when I have the opportunity to make it happen for myself. And so I think a lot of people can get stuck in that you're kind of waiting for the world to fall around you or the abundance to come to you. And I think spirituality is incredibly important, and that having a connection to something is important. But I don't know if I can really stick with the whole big guy in the sky making the world go round type situation.
You've used one of my favorite words 3 times now in the last minute, so I have to bring it into the conversation. That word is connection. I firmly believe that there are lots of things we could point to that, I would like this to be different about the world. I like that to be better, and so on. For me, I think the one thing that would make the most difference today in the world if there was more human connection going on. Not that there isn't any. There's lots going on. I would just like to see more of it, because I just deeply believe that the more human connection is going on a regular basis, on a daily basis, the better things get for everybody involved. And I'm curious to know what your take is on connection.
Oh gosh, I think connection is the epitome to our human existence. I feel like that's genuinely one of the reasons that we get a human experience is connecting with other humans. I say this all the time on my podcast, and particularly to parenting, that every parenting journey is completely unprecedented. But I will say every human experience, every single one of us is living an unprecedented experience. There's never been an exact person with your circumstances and the time that you are in, dealing with the traumas that you have, or dealing with the opportunities that you have, maybe some of the roadblocks that you have. It's never happened. And the only way in the past that anybody has ever been able to get through is connecting with other humans and learning to work together. And social media is an amazing, wonderful thing that has allowed us to connect with more people all over the world. But I genuinely feel like those connections are a lot more superficial than they used to be. And that's one of the reasons I love podcasting so much, because instead of a like 30-second reel of something explaining to you, like I feel like you genuinely get to the root of connecting with those people. And so it's been an interesting experience, but I think connection is everything. And without connection, it's just like, I don't even understand what life would be like without seeking that connection. I feel like that's such a sad, lonely, isolated space.
I love that. Yeah, I love that a lot. One of my goals is to help reintroduce the social back into social media, because that seems to have been lost somewhere along the way. Not taking anything away from Mark Zuckerberg and the others, but they kind of skipped that part. I think that's really if you're going to call it social media, shouldn't there be a social component to it?
And it's hard because, like, I think we have, as a world, have genuinely just lost the importance of human life, and because for so long, so many people couldn't see the people outside of their communities, the abuse and, horrific things that happen all over the world weren't as easily accessible for people to see. And in a lot of ways, people say that has divided people, because it's made people have very strong opinions one way or another. But also, I think in another way, it's really connected those people who are for everybody and wanting to bring that inclusivity. And I think it's also been a really beautiful and inclusive space that didn't exist and wasn't something that was out there before.
Jody Lynn, you know me, I can keep asking questions endlessly, but I have to remind myself that Jody Lynn has a lot to contribute. So I'm going to turn the mic over and say, Jody Lynn, what are you thinking about right now?
I feel like we've gone in so many different directions. I'm not sure where we could take it. We were talking about connection, and I agree with everything that you're saying, Britt. Connection is the ultimate. And I think not only have we seen with social media different things, like we're more open to what's going on, but I think now society is beginning to see how narrowly focused we've been on things and stuff rather than connection and like the human hearts and the people behind the things. Like we've, been so entrapped in to focus on, you need to get a good job, you need to get a degree or whatever, and then you got to get a nice car and a nice house and then have 2.5 kids and the husband or the wife or all of these things, and never going back to what we started this conversation with, that inner fulfillment, never really asking yourself, what a beautiful question, pick 3 things that you like outside of other people. I think people would struggle to answer that question, right here in this moment. What a great place to start. So that's kind of what was mulling in my head, was all the mashup of all of those things and how we're going back to that fulfillment piece.
It's a cool thing. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Britt, as you're looking down the road, based on, just within the context of what we're talking about here, what do you see? Where do you think it's going to evolve to?
Well, my ultimate big dream, I have big dreams. So
you noticed that, by the way. That kind of jumps right out. First thing you mentioned it, you notice it. Yeah.
So my ultimate dream is I really want to get on the road with my keynote speech. My keynote speech is Abundance Unlocked: How to Escape Fleeting Fulfillment Through Self-Connection and Intentional Action. And that's where I teach about the 4 A's to unlocking abundance, and kind of walk audiences through that. I've been working with a public speaking coach and all of that, and we're just hoping to get my full speaking website launched in the next couple of weeks, and finally really getting that off the ground. So that's hopefully my next goal. I would love to would love to do like a TED Talk, the whole thing. And then I also have 3 books. I started with one, which was kind of the unlocking abundance and like the bare bones of that. But then I also started writing a parenting portion of that. So how to kind of reparent yourself while you're parenting, and kind of reconnecting through yourself and finding and unlocking abundance as a parent, because that does look different when you have different responsibilities and small humans. And that also changes what resources some people have available to them. And so I thought it was really important to have a separate one for that. And then I'm also currently working on one that is like more workbook based, that's more for teens. So I'm a foster mom. And so that has been one of my biggest things, is teaching that I've loved doing with all of the kiddos that have been in my home. I've had 13 in the last 3 years that we've been fostering.
Wow.
Is how to start to find connection to themselves, because that's often something that's not modeled, because a lot of these kids, their parents aren't unable to cope with their own emotions in a healthy way, which is why a lot of these kids are in the system. And so my ultimate dream would one day to be launching a nonprofit and somehow get those books into the teen books into shelters and group homes all over the country. That would be my big dream, but time and money. So that's where I plan to go. And I would just love to travel and speak and help find people to help unlock abundance and get unstuck, because it's a miserable place to be.
Well, I don't know about you, but when I looked at the website for Britt and was like, okay, I'm not really sure where this conversation was going to go. I never would have guessed this. Like, Britt, how did you go from I am a lactation specialist to let's talk about the 4 A's of abundance and getting unstuck with your life? Like, it just feels so far apart. Like, I understand your story and why you were driven, but how do you, I just, how?
So honestly, it was my entire life fell apart in December. So last August, I went to start a small business with a friend. We were going to, I'm a lactation consultant, and she was a home birth midwife in the area. We worked in a co-op that's very big on like women's health and families. And in August, we got an investor to invest in our store. We were going to open, it was called Poised Perinatal, and it was going to have all of the supplies from birth and pregnancy to the first year of life that were actual necessities and tried and true by professionals in the area and not just random whatever. So we took off, we started buying inventory, we started looking at spaces to lease. And in November, things started to get weird with my business partner. They just stopped kind of responding to things, wasn't really accountable. And so my investor and I jumped in. She was our chief financial officer for the business, as she had a business degree in entrepreneurship and investment. So I'm like, oh, great, you know what you're doing. And we found that she had embezzled over almost about $10,000 of the investment over 6 weeks. And of course, when my investor found that, they decided to pull the rest of their investment, and I liquidated inventory to pay back their financial rest of the investment. And we then launched into a full-on court case against my business partner, who was at the time one of my closest friends. So I found out all of this on December 29th, and on January 2nd, I all of a sudden randomly stopped being able to swallow my spit. I couldn't get anything down, and ended up in the hospital for 6 days because the stress response from the experience had caused my body to onset with a weird, rare casein protein allergy that was causing my esophagus to close up. But it took them 6 days and multiple procedures and all of these things to figure it out. But I was in this hospital room by myself for 6 days in the beginning of the year. And I went from writing the week before of all of these amazing, huge goals that I had for this business and the families that I wanted to serve in the area, and to now not knowing what the next steps were going to be, and my health was crumbling, and I was just alone and stuck. And so I had a lot of time to kind of mull on things, and I just started writing. I just started writing down in a notepad, different parts of my life and different feelings I was feeling, and all the way rooted back to my childhood and how my abandonment of my business partner felt like the abandonment of my father, like all the way like tied completely back. And so I just wrote it all down, and I was up till like 5 a.m. because what do you do when you're in the hospital by yourself anyways? It's not like you're getting any sleep. And finally put everything away, had a good cry, and was like, okay, like I feel better. The next day I'm scrolling on Instagram, and this ad for a public speaker named Jess Ekstrom actually came up, and it was all about how your story is important, it matters, and it's going to change lives. You just have to be willing to tell it. So I sat down, and that's kind of started the outline to the book, and kind of where I started all of that. And then as I started working through my program with Jess and a couple other amazing people that she has on her team through her Mic Drop Academy, I've really started to kind of hone down and figure out. I found a quote from Phil Stutz that was kind of the like big part of it. It talks about how every person in the human experience, we all experience 3 things: pain, uncertainty, and constant work. But when we can find joy in that process and joy in the change, then we can take opportunity and turn adversity into opportunity. And so I started doing all kinds of delve into self-connection, and then found this incredible article about how in a bunch of studies they looked at self-awareness is so often taught in master's degree programs, and is talked about in massive public speaking events and workshops taught at all kinds of business, because self-awareness shows that it helps improve your business outcomes, your productivity, all of that. But when they started looking at studies, they were finding that people who identified as self-aware but were not self-accepting were actually more likely to have anxiety, depression, and not reap any of the benefits of self-awareness. And then the study then talked about self-alignment, which is learning how to harness and be aware of how you feel and why, accept how that impacts you, and then align your actions with your true self. And that's kind of how I started to bridge into the 4 A's of abundance and have gone from there. So it's honestly been a huge change. January, I started trying to start the Odd Mom Pod in October, but then after everything happened, it got tabled until the end of January. And it kind of just solidified for me that connecting and speaking and meeting others and hearing about all these amazing resources out there, books that are out there that you don't even know about, I'm like, that is what I want to do. I want to help people find that. So
it's so interesting that like the mirror of I don't even know if it's a mirror, but like it was your esophagus, obviously, but you can't breathe. If you can't breathe, you can't talk. Like you were shut down there in an opportunity to only find out that's really what you need to be doing, is to be speaking. What a beautiful opportunity.
I had never thought about it like that, but that's
crazy.
That's amazing. Like, honestly, I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's so true. It was kind of my body saying like, this is what we need to focus on. And so
that's what you were doing. I mean, you were speaking to a pad.
Yeah.
You were speaking in writing.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm not a good writer. Like I've never was not somebody who wrote for fun. I never journaled. I've never had a diary. My sister is an incredible writer and author and writes all these amazing things. And I'm like, I couldn't, but in that moment when I was just writing from my core self, I couldn't stop. And so that's kind of like, okay, that's where we're meant to be. And so I'm still running my Your Feeding Friend business currently. I'm still seeing clients in person and virtually. It's kind of been keeping the lights on and funding the new programs and all of that. And I love getting to serve families in my community. And the nice thing about being my own business owner is that I get to make my hours. So I've been able to be like, okay, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm focusing on the podcast and my public speaking stuff. And then I'm still in office half the time. So it's been that in itself, it's, that was something that maybe I didn't necessarily find as like my full fulfillment, but it's played such an amazing part in my life and has continued to allow me to move to the next thing. And so, when you're in that stuck space and it feels hard, like you have to remember that your circumstance right now is important and it does hold lessons and pieces to the next part of the puzzle, but ultimately it's up to you to decide what to do with it.
Jody Lynn and I can both totally relate to the bit about what it's like working for yourself, being an entrepreneur, developing your schedule, your lifestyle, making it work the way it works for you, the way it works best for you. I think we're also, I tell me if I'm wrong, Jody Lynn, but I think I can safely speak for you and say, I think we're both kind of blown away at how quickly you were able to come through all of this. I mean, that was just a few months ago. And you have not only did you go through a pretty hellish time, you have not just bounced back, you've exploded back. I mean, seriously, all the stuff that you just laid out for us, that's the kind of thing that for many people it would take years to lay that out. And that's after going through the first 6 to 12 months of therapy in order to get past the things that they went through. You just kind of like blew right through all that. And the word that comes to my mind is resilience. There's a tremendous resilience in you.
Well, I think that's one thing, and I will say over and over that I was taught very, very from a young age. My mom was a teen mom. My dad wasn't fantastic to her. He cheated on her. She got out of a really difficult marriage. She got into an abusive marriage. It was really difficult. She struggled for years. We had to leave in the middle of the night and flee for our safety. But, she came back and she went to school and she worked multiple jobs. And so my emotional safety maybe wasn't there as a child, but I never went without because my mom, regardless of her circumstances, worked really freaking hard. And when my life got really hard and I turned and was making bad choices, her resilience of saying like, okay, maybe your path doesn't have to look the same way. Like my mom let me drop out of high school in 10th grade because I was addicted to drugs and there was going to be no way I was going to get caught up. And she was like, let's get your GED, which like no parent would be like, would rather you drop out of school because I think it's going to be better for you. So she let me drop out of high school. And within 6 months, I had gotten to a medical assisting program and went to nursing school and found like that was my jumping path, and kind of how I got into the lactation side of things was working with families in the hospital and kind of finding that really specific niche that I wanted to serve. But honestly, the resilience is one thing that, when you talked about earlier, are you thankful for the difficult things that you've gone through? I wouldn't say I'm thankful for any of them, but I think each of those teaches you lessons, and you take that, and over each difficult one that I've done, I've learned new coping techniques. I've learned new ways to connect to myself. I've learned new ways to take action. And so it was just essentially sitting down and culminating years of difficulty into what consistently worked to help me get back on my feet, what consistently worked to help my mom get back on her feet. And it was always connecting to myself, always being accepting of your situation and deciding to change it yourself.
Wow. I'm thinking of a few things. One thing I'm thinking is we may want to have you back at some point because not only is Jody Lynn getting the experience of chatting with you, but I have another co-host named Joel Elston who has his own storyline, a really fascinating storyline. He's one of the ones who said he's very grateful for the traumas he went through, and he went through some pretty bad ones too. But one of the things that he has in common with you that I'd really like to hear the two of you talking about is he is not, well, he is not a foster father. He has adopted 3 And he is a life coach who tends, this is not something he planned to do, it just kind of happened. He tends to get social workers bringing him the foster kids who are the biggest problems, the ones who are least adoptable, the ones who are in trouble all the time, who have all the issues going on, who are on 25 different medications, all this kind of stuff. And he helps them turn their lives around. And one of his, I would say it's one of his proudest things to talk about. I don't know if he describes it that way, but it probably is. He has personally helped to find forever homes for 43 of these boys who have been in a situation where they were considered completely unadoptable. I mean, I'm sure you know, as a foster mom, if you're in the foster system and you reach the age of 18, the likelihood of you being either dead or in jail by age 25 is close to 100%. So
Wow.
it's a really, really big deal. And I would just love to have you and him talking and me sitting back going, oh, this is so cool.
I would love it. I will totally come back. It's fascinating. It's definitely interesting. I had cousins that grew up in the foster system, which was kind of suffered tremendous trauma at the hands of some of their foster parents, in addition to the trauma that they were experiencing in their home. And my family was never at a point financially or able. I mean, my mom was 17. We were barely, we were just fending for ourselves and trying to keep us afloat, let alone being able to bring other kids in. But it's always been, kind of something I had wanted to do, was I just wanted to create a safe space for kids and know for sure that 100% of the kids in my home, I could say for sure that they were safe and that they learned something while they were there, no matter how long that they were there. And so we've had kids as short as 48 hours. Our one kiddo who will be adopting at the end of May actually has been with us for almost 2 years in July.
Oh,
Wow.
congratulations.
So yeah, so it's definitely been interesting, and it's hard, when you're a parent and you've had trauma, your children's emotions and things like that are so triggering. And then when you are parenting kids with trauma, a lot of times their trauma is triggering. And so if you aren't able to have those coping skills, but honestly, I swear that some of the foster parents who have come from trauma themselves and have been able to persevere, they make some of the best foster parents for really difficult placements like that, because they're a living testament to like your situation, and your experiences don't define who you are. You get to pick that. And not a lot of kids get that experience. And so that's, one day what I hope to do with the book is teach kids that and get it out there, especially when you are in those unadoptable situations. I had a 13-year-old for a couple months who had been in and out of multiple shelters and in and out of multiple therapeutic placements. And we struggled, and she didn't stay as long as she needed to because we had a physical altercation that was not so great towards me. But her and I still keep in touch, and I will lovingly tell her, I love you, and what you are doing matters and important to me. And I can't have you in your home because it's triggering for my trauma, and this is mine. It is not yours, but it's hard for me. But like, I'm still here to be there for you and be a part of your life. And she has been able to go back with a sister and is doing really, really well. And that's where it's so important to like, you're not going to be able to fix or change every kiddo. You're not going to be able to solve all the problems. No, you can't take in every single kid, but if you can at least leave them with something, or at least one safe person that they know they can come to, even if they wronged them, that's the other thing. You're showing up for them. You know what? Your action was wrong, and I'm setting the boundary. I will not let you treat me like that, but it doesn't change how I feel about you and that I still care about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's one of the hardest things for anyone to learn under any circumstance, which is I can't fix somebody else. We want to. I mean, let's be honest. We all there's at least one person in our lives, probably more than one, probably quite a few, that we really feel like if I could just tweak that, they would be so much better off. But we really can't. And that's the hard part, trying to come to terms with that.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Jody Lynn, you're quiet as usual. I mean, I'm going to keep drawing you out until I get you jumping in more. But at this point,
I just like to be the observer. I just like
I
this
know you do.
conversation. There's so many things that we can draw upon. Britt, your resourcefulness, the things that you've been through. Like, I mean, I thought, we'd heard a tremendous amount at the very beginning. And then you're like, oh, hey, I dropped out of school and I, went to nursing. And like, I just watching Walt's face and it's hilarious because he was like, how I felt inside too. Like, oh my gosh, you've been through so much. And from the perspective of taking care of foster kids, I think that the way that you're looking at it is so unique and so different, and like just in the way that their trauma is triggering you, and what I see in that is it's an opportunity for you to heal those things about yourself. But not only that, start teaching this next generation, these children, like, hey, this is an opportunity to choose something different in your life, and give them the tools and the skills that you didn't get. No one taught you. You went and sought out and learned yourself, and now you're teaching these kids, and they'll be able to teach other people. And it just deepens, I think, the necessity for your podcast also, because growing up in my household, my parents were great, but my parents had their own trauma. My mom especially had her own traumas with sexual abuse and, alcohol abuse and like different things like that. And when I was going through things at particular times in my life, now I see it even more because you've spoken to it. I was her trigger. And it took a really long time in my life, decades really, to accept her behavior. Like, she was just doing the best that she could, and I would never really understand why or have the ability to have that kind of conversation. But I feel like just having this conversation today has given me an even more deeper acceptance and understanding of I think that was on purpose. I think we're all here for one another and have the opportunity to teach and learn from all of the things that are happening. Like you said, they're all opportunities. I don't even have a question because I'm just in awe. So that's why I'm quiet, Walt.
You can see why I wanted to bring her out, though, Britt, because when I can get Jody to open up, all of a sudden there's just spout of information that comes out, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you're hiding nuggets in there, Jody Lynn.
You're right. You're right. I don't need to have like an esophagus problem. I feel like I just,
use your voice.
My slap on the back from the universe. Like, you just need to talk more.
Yes, share your experience. It helps people connect.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I'm going to ask a question I've never asked. Now, I've been doing this podcast for 11 years now, 11 plus years.
Wow.
I've done over 2,000 episodes.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea. That's cool. Yeah. That's wild.
I've said this before. I mean, if you'd asked me 11 years ago if I was going to do 2,000 episodes, I would have said, yeah, right.
I'm like editing 17 this week, and I'm like, what did I do?
I'll give you a clue. The secret is stop editing. Just don't do it anymore. It's not good for you. It's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's also how you create a real sense of authenticity, because when people hear all the glitches and the bleeps and the technical stuff that didn't work and so forth, they think you're real, which, by the way, you really are. So it's just kind of it works very nicely together.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I've never asked this question before. What's your take about being on the show today? Like, what are you feeling right now?
I love it. This is honestly so. Podcasting has been such a creative outlet for me since I really got into it in January, and I honestly found that guesting on other people's podcasts is just such a way, one, to like learn and meet new people. And I've learned amazing things from authors that I've interviewed and gotten connections to book publishers who I can now maybe talk to. And, it's definitely not what I would have expected it to be, a place where I would find so much like creative expression, but also like it has just been such a place of connection for me. And it's been amazing. And so I love every opportunity that I get to be on a podcast and share with people. And everybody has different audiences, and we can all benefit from hearing from different perspectives and broadening our horizons. And I think guesting on podcasts is one of the best way to do that, because I'm reaching people now that maybe never would have heard this story. And now maybe somebody who really needed to hear this will learn something, or somebody will find the podcast and find an episode that I did with somebody as a guest that then links to a resource that helps change their life. And ultimately that's the goal.
Yeah. I got to follow up with one more question on this. Is there anything that has transpired during the show, anything we've talked about that jumps out at you and says, wow, that surprised me. I really wasn't expecting that to come up. Or, whoa, that went in a direction I was not looking at, but that's kind of cool. Or I really didn't like that direction at all, but it kind of worked out okay. I mean, is there anything that jumps out like that?
I honestly thought it was all over the place, but it was also like very like well driven. You're very good. You've definitely done this a few times, because you know how to like direct and like, that's really exciting information, but like, let's bring it back over here. Honestly, I think Jody Lynn's like, your throat was what was impairing your ability to speak. And like, that was part of your story, I think, was like one like eye-opening nugget and a perspective that I hadn't really looked at it before. And so now it really just brought a whole new layer. And so that is definitely something that like I will take with me, because I think it's really poetic in a way.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. That's what connection's all about, is when you're connected, when you really connect with somebody, whether it's somebody that you know really well or somebody you're meeting for the first time, when the connection is genuine and when it's real, all kinds of stuff happens. And I would even submit that, I mean, we were discussing earlier about how resilient you've been and how you learned resilience from a young age. You gave us a really good sense of how your biography, your personal biography has, basically made that happen. But in the course of doing all of that, you've also demonstrated to us that, this is something that comes through when you connect. That when you connect, the connection draws this kind of stuff out of you. I think it's why I asked my question, like, what your experience has been, because I think in a piece of me, I was really wondering, what's the connection like from your perspective? Because I'll tell you, from my perspective, it's always the same. I always want to have the same experience. It's the subtitle, Your Daily Dose of Happy. So if I'm feeling better at the end of the show, I know everybody else is too. We're all feeling good. We're higher vibe. Great. Goal accomplished. But how that's going to play out is going to be very different from guest to guest. And I think I just wanted to know, how is it playing out for you? What's that connection doing? And you gave us a good clue. So thank you for that. That was really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when Jody is like, it gives me a different perspective to look at something, that's ultimately my goal, right? Like that's what I love doing, is just providing a different lens that somebody can maybe look at something that they went through in a different way and say like, maybe that, like, there were other sides that I didn't understand, or that did impact me in a way, but like now I can understand why that action was a little bit more, even if we can't fully grasp it. So
yeah, it's good stuff. Wow. Okay, so we can't just cut it off here, by the way. Just so you know, we just can't do that. There are a couple things we need to do first. First, we got to find out, for somebody who does want to reach out to you, maybe they are dealing with lactation stuff. Maybe they are interested in your 4As. Maybe maybe they know how to connect you in to do your TED Talk. I was actually going to draw you out and get you to give us the first 3 minutes of the TED Talk, but I'm going to let you off the hook on that one. But what I can't let you off on the hook on is, for somebody who does want to find you, how do they reach you?
Yeah. So yourfeedingfriend.com is my website for lactation stuff. I'm in network with a lot of major insurances. I'm very big on accessibility, because I don't feel that care should be a privilege. I think it's a right. And so I try to make myself accessible so they can reach me that way if they need specific infant feeding help. I also have a website, oddmompod.com. They can subscribe to my newsletter there, and that's where I'll be kind of releasing more as I release my speaker website and the books as they come out. That'll be the first mailing list. And then Instagram is a good way to connect with me, or LinkedIn. My Instagram is Brittany Sandoval RN, and my LinkedIn is Britt Sandoval.
All right, good. So lots of opportunities, lots of different ways to connect, which is a good thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And we'll get it. We'll put a couple of website links into the show notes too, so that we like to make it easy whenever we can for people.
Well, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate you guys so much. It's been a phenomenal interview, and I appreciate what you guys do for the podcast community, because connecting others is important.
But we're not done yet.
Oh, we're not. Oh, okay.
We're not done yet. Believe it or not, there are actually 2 more things we have to do.
Okay.
The first one is something that I started doing almost 2 years ago now, when I noticed that there's a very important and very overlooked gap in the appreciation realm. We appreciate a lot of things. People are learning more and more to appreciate lots of things, but I noticed that we have a tendency to not appreciate just how much is given for free through podcasts and blogs and posts on social media and all this stuff to people, and the people benefit from it and they never get thanked for that. And I said, whoa, wait a minute here. We got to shift that around. So for the last couple of years, I've made it a practice to say, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, thank you, Britt, for what you've been doing, what you've been putting out there to the world, because you're making a difference in this world.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate hearing that.
I think it's important. I also know something else is important, because as much as I was able to draw Jody Lynn out, there's one thing I always like to draw her out on at the very end. She's so good at it. See, Jody Lynn has, well, I have 3 co-hosts who do the shows with me. There's Joel, there's Jody Lynn, and Anne Marie Young, who does the Monday show with me. All 3 of them have this ability. They have the ability to just take everything that we talked about and tie it up with a bow and make it the perfect summary at the end. And Jody Lynn is like, she's at the top of the heap when this is concerned. So with that pressure applied.
No pressure, Jody Lynn.
Every time. Oh, man. All right. Well, I'll just take a deep breath and I'll do this thing. Your story, Britt. You said it in your own words. I think it was a quote from somebody else, but you are the epitome of this quote. Your adversity is your opportunity to not only change your own life, but to change others. And although we've been from one end of the spectrum to the other end and everywhere in between, it's kind of like life. It's our reminder that where you are is maybe not necessarily where you will always be, but there's an opportunity to learn something here and to take that to change and to grow and to find fulfillment and connection. So thank you so much for that reminder and for the hope that you give to all those listening today, as well as all of those who will ever hear your story, that things can change and things can be amazing. And you get to rewrite and speak a new story for tomorrow. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, I'm almost crying. I'm like, that's so good. You're right. She does have like a top tier on that.
Right?
That's impressive. It is impressive.
I mean, I'm not blowing smoke here. She really is good.
No, that was really good. I'm impressed. Wow.
Thank you.
Woo.
Yeah,
like you're like one of those AI generators that just like smashed out like a
That's right.
but she's even better than an AI generator.
For real.
Because it's yeah, it's real.
Yeah,
It's genuine.
it's that emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, I'm a big fan of AI, so I don't mean to demean AI, because
But the human experience is better. It's always going to be better.
Well, yeah. I think that may shift over time. I think we're going to find conscious AI is going to start coming out sometime in the next few years, if it hasn't already. So, I leave that door open. But right now, where we're at right now with AI, AI has trouble topping that one.
Yes, definitely. For now, Jody Lynn.
I gotta be.
We don't know forever, but for now, you did great.
It's hard to stay king of the hill. There's always somebody trying to knock you off the top.
Meh, I'm not worried about it. Like Britt said, there's only one me, only one experience of me, just like
embrace
everybody
that
else.
authenticity. Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
I got this one.
Absolutely love it. Hey, Britt, thanks so much for joining us. This has been really fun.
Yes,
we
thank
really
you.
appreciate you. I will be reaching out to try to arrange time to have you back when I do the show with Joel. I want to hear you guys talk. And I know he'll love it. He will absolutely love that conversation.
Yay! I'm excited. It'll be awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
So we'll definitely connect on that. But thank you so much, and thank you, Jody Lynn, as usual. Once I got you out there talking, you were wonderful as usual. So thank you for that. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.